Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about Stephen King's very first novel, Carrie. Carrie was published in 1974 and was basically an immediate success. It was originally intended to be a short story for a men's magazine. King famously threw the manuscript in the trash because he felt that since he felt uncomfortable writing from the perspective of a teenage girl, that it wouldn't be successful. His wife Tabitha King dug it out of the trash and convinced him to keep going after reading through it. Since then, Carrie has spawned film adaptations, a TV special, and even a freaking Broadway musical. I was voracious in my consumption of this book. It's not a very long book. My copy here has maybe 290 pages and has a pretty large font size. Regardless, you could probably burn through this book in maybe 6 to 8 hours. It's a very easy read. It's not broken up by chapters. Instead, new scenes are broken up by double paragraph spaces. And between some of the scenes are excerpts from future news reports, scientific documents, and biographies from people involved in the Carrie incident. It's surprising how many Stephen King tropes are present in this book, with it being his very first, and it is connected to his larger Dark Tower multiverse. I don't have time to point out everything, but of course there's psychic abilities, vicious high school bullies, religious freaks, etc. I'll link to a video by Mike's Book Reviews where he talks about Carrie's connections to the multiverse. It's insane. If you somehow don't know any of this, Carrie White is a 16-year-old girl who gets intensely bullied by her classmates for a plethora of reasons. One day in the showers, after gym, Carrie gets her first period. She starts panicking, believing she's going to die because her religious fanatic mother, Margaret, never taught her about menstruation because she believes that anything even remotely involving sexuality or femininity is inherently sinful. As Carrie panics, a preppy girl named Chris Hargensen starts throwing tampons and sanitary napkins at her, leading a chant of
period, period, period,
and
plug it up, plug it up. Plug it up.
Like it was a fucking sports rally. The gym teacher, Rita, enters and helps Carrie compose herself and asks the principal to dismiss her from school early. As Carrie wanders home, she remembers an incident that occurred when she was 3. She caused stones to fall from the sky and destroy the roof of her house. She practices her telekinetic powers on a kid who was passing by on his bike that began to mock her. She forced him to crash his bike, and I firmly believe punk kid fucking deserved it. As Carrie returns home, she's met by her mother, who promptly accuses her of sin and locks her away in a closet as punishment. The next day, gym teacher Rita reprimands Chris and not only suspends her, but also expels her from attending prom. This enrages Chris. No pompous silver spoon sucking rich girl is going to be barred from going to prom. So she enlists her father to sort it out with the principal, and surprisingly, he fails. Chris's punishment remains. This is when she begins to plot her infamous revenge. Sue Snell, one of the other girls who joined in on the bullying in the locker room, begins to grow remorseful and asks her boyfriend Tommy to take Carrie to prom as an effort to apologize. He agrees, rather reluctantly. Carrie also agrees to go with Tommy after some initial suspicion and begins to sew her own prom dress. Meanwhile, Chris successfully persuades her boyfriend Billy and his gang of greasers to help her enact her revenge. Gather 2 buckets of pig's blood. Her part in it is to rig the prom queen and king election to ensure that Carrie and Tommy win. Prom initially goes off without a hitch. Carrie is welcomed in by Tommy and his friends and discover that while she's a bit weird due to her upbringing, she's pleasant to be around. Carrie discovers that there are people in the world who are kind and aren't out to destroy her. And then everything goes downhill from there. Carrie and Tommy win the election all according to Chris's plan. During their coronation, Chris, using a pulley system, drops the buckets of blood from above the stage. Horror ensues. Tommy gets straight up killed by the head-on collision with the blood bucket, and Carrie is left dumbfounded and drenched. After a moment of tense silence, it's broken by laughter. Laughter so horrible and humiliating, Carrie storms out of the school in distress. Outside the school, Carrie lies in the grass, beaten, mocked, but then she remembers. She remembers her powers. In a fit of estranged giggling, Carrie pushes herself from the grass and begins to move back towards the school. Using her telekinesis, she seals off all the exits to the gym and activates the sprinkler system inside. This in turn electrifies the band equipment. The electrocution then sparks a fire that eventually ignites the fuel tanks and causes the building to explode. Very few people escape alive. Carrie, enveloped by her rage, telekinetically opens every hydrant in the vicinity to prevent any chance of fighting the fire. As she stalks back toward her home to confront her evil mother, she cuts power lines and causes a nearby gas station to erupt. Her power increases, randomly destroying entire swaths of Chamberlain, Maine, and broadcasting imagery of the destruction and havoc she has committed into people's minds. Carrie comes home and finds Margaret with a knife, ready to kill her daughter, who she believes has been possessed by Satan. Margaret reveals that Carrie was a child born of marital rape, and then stabs her in the shoulder. Carrie tells her mother that she brought a gift, and as Margaret White begins to speak her final living prayer, Carrie mentally slows her mother's heart until it ceases to beat. That's one villain taken care of. There were two more still out there that she needed to end. Carrie makes her way to the seedy inn where she was conceived. There she finds Chris and Billy, who had fled there after the destruction began. Billy attempts to run Carrie over with his car, but she flexes her powers and causes them to crash into a wall, ending Billy and Chris. As this was all happening, Sue Snell was following the images in the telepathic broadcast that Carrie sent out to try and find her. In the parking lot of the Roadhouse, Sue finds Carrie collapsed and bleeding out. After a brief telepathic conversation, Carrie dies crying out for her mother. Chamberlain, Maine is left for ruin in the wake of the Carrie White incident. Despite efforts from the federal government to rehab the town, survivors of the incident leave in droves, hoping to leave the nightmare behind them. Rita, the gym teacher, and the school's principal blame themselves for the tragedy and resign from their positions. Sue publishes a memoir. The mysterious White Committee come to believe that there will be others like Carrie in the world, and that study into paranormal abilities is taking the scientific community by storm. In a small epilogue, Amelia Jenks writes a letter to her sister about her baby's newfound telekinetic powers. It reminds her of her grandmother. Carrie is more than just a horror novel. It's a tragedy. I can relate heavily to Carrie as far as the bullying goes. I've been made fun of my entire schooling life about my appearance, my weight, my behavior, even my last name. Kids are cruel. It's really sad to think about how common this vicious behavior is, and school districts do little to nothing to actually prevent the bullying from happening in the first place, no matter how many anti-bullying rallies and fundraisers they put on. As I was reading this, I really felt like Carrie, and it was that emotional attachment to her that kept me soaring through every page. King has always been good at character work and figuring out what makes people tick, and it was evident since the beginning. Being constantly picked on can really warp one's sense of self, and King understands that to a great degree. Margaret White is downright terrifying. Throughout the entire book, she mentally and physically abuses Carrie while reciting religious passages and psalms. I didn't grow up in a very religious household, so I don't have like religious trauma, but by God, do religious fanatics scare the shit out of me. Margaret White is on another level. She's more than just a religious fanatic. She very well may be the devil himself. This book is going to stick with me for a very long time, perhaps more so than any other King book that I've read, and I've read a lot of them. If you somehow haven't read this yet and you're a horror fan, you need to pick this up. While it's far from the perfect novel, I love it dearly, and there's a reason it kicked off King's 50+ year reign as the King of Horror. No pun intended. Thank you guys so very much for watching my review of Carrie. If you're a Stephen King constant reader, let me know what your favorite Stephen King book is in the comments below. Thank you guys for watching the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up. It would really help out with the algorithm. And subscribe if you want to see more videos like this one. Bye-bye.